Hello. Okay.
Hey, what? Get him.
See, silly boy. Oh, sad.
Is the inside of the vessel red?
Good question. I think they're more, well, the inside,
The
well,
interior walls.
the interior walls are probably not red. They're probably, I would imagine they're sort of whitish, like your connective
Yeah.
tissue would be. But I've only ever seen them with, well, I have seen them empty. Think about your pig and stuff. When you took that apart, you had the,
Well, those are balloons. They were
right, the
clear.
latex was in them, but
They would have been, because you were able to see the color of latex, and they would have been clear.
they're very thin, is
Yeah.
what it is. They're actually kind of whitish, but they're very thin.
Yeah.
You could pull the ones that you could pull the latex out of, you could see them. It was
Yeah.
very thin. Okay, so I made because I can't remember whose stack is what. I made a little sign for stackage here. All right, so Sydney and Savannah are on with us. Hey, girls. So we're gonna go ahead, since Paul's done crunching the bag, crunch the bag. Let me get this started too. Paul's a bag cruncher. Apparently. He did. What?
Anybody here want coffees? It's another open bag. We're not gonna need it unless Drew wants. Drew doesn't want it.
Not right now.
No, but like, there's people here. Does anybody want coffees?
Somebody want a bag of Takis? I don't know. Whatever. Okay. Yeah, cool. We're trying to learn. Get it together. Oops, I hit that button twice. And I did not mean to.
Generous and give away a bag of coffee.
Hello, camera switch. Why isn't it switching? I hit the camera switch button like 4 times. Okay, fine. Do that way. We'll go this way. Can you see better now? I don't know what you can see. Usually it shows up regularly. I can't see it, so. I'm gonna hope that's correct because I can't see. Okay. All right, so let's get started. Circulatory, respiratory, fun stuff. So, function. Oh, it's turned off, so just leave it, please. Leave it, please. Thank you. So I put the little squares over top of stuff, but I forgot that my animation had it floating in. So I guess if you're fast, you'll see what it is already. So our function of the circulatory system is going to be to transport what? We're transporting 2 things, James. Nutrients is 1. Ethan, oxygen. Raise your hand next time so everybody get a fair shake. Okay, yes, we're transporting oxygen and nutrients through the body with our circulatory system. It's going to remove waste from your tissue. So it's going to take your good stuff in, take your bad stuff out. What is an example of a waste it might remove?
CO2.
Very good, Alex. That's a good one. Why?
It's a byproduct or waste product of cellular respiration.
You are on the point. That is it. Yes, it is. It is the product of cellular respiration, and it's left behind, and we don't need it. We need to get rid of it. So there it comes out. So it's gonna. Why does it say that twice?
From tissues.
From the tissues. That's great. Works with the immune system to protect against illnesses. As your love keeps me alive, and Dwight would say false. Your circulatory, respiratory, nervous systems keep you alive. Gotta have a Dwight meme every so often. So here's your heart. All right, so we're gonna look at it first for a minute before we start clicking things. First off, the little fun fact here, in 1 year, the human body will pump enough blood to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Now, obviously, you don't have that much blood in your body. That would be crazy, but it's talking about the flow, the measure of the flow. Like you've got like if you ever have like a fish pond or even a tank, there's a certain rate of flow, and that's what it's talking about. You could fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So you have these 2 blue vessels right here. Typically, when we diagram, what does blue mean?
Unoxygenated.
Deoxygenated or unoxygenated, right? Okay, and red means oxygenated, right? Okay, so you have right here your superior vena cava, and this guy down here is your inferior vena cava. This doesn't mean that he's not as good. It just means he comes from the bottom. He's inferior. So you have your inferior vena cava. These are where all of the veins in your body kind of come together into these 2 points. Where is the blood coming from that's filling your superior vena cava? Michael.
Your everything except for your lungs.
This one here.
The blue one.
Yeah, where's it getting it? Where's the blood?
Brain and.
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah, your brain and stuff. This is coming from your brain. Everything kind of here up, definitely your brain. And then where's this one's coming from everywhere else, right? All the lower parts of your body. So they come together right here and they pour into this first little area, which is your right atrium. Okay, have you ever seen an atrium in a building? Ever been in an atrium? It's usually kind of a waiting area, like a narthex in a church, or a lot of buildings have them. They tend to have a lot of times they have lots of windows and whatever. It's sort of like a place where everybody gathers before you go into wherever the things are being done. Things aren't being done in an atrium so much as it is just a place to gather up before things are done. So if you think about that as the atrium is a place where all the blood just kind of pools and gets ready to do what it's going to do. So then you have this tricuspid valve. Based on its name, who can tell me what you think it looks like? Ooh. All right, Bailey, what do you think it looks like? Tricuspid valve. Oh, did you have your hand up? No.
You said
Oh, I'm sorry, Piper. I looked right at you. You guys, there's too many of you in here. Piper, baby, I'm sorry. I'm sure your mother does it too, doesn't she? Okay. She never does it?
one of my biology teachers does.
Oh, really? I just do it because I call my kids by the wrong names all the time. So anyway, sorry, Piper. So what's the tricuspid valve look like, do you think? Based on its appearance, what do you think?
3 ways or something.
3 something, yeah, 3 something for sure. All right, so what do we think it is? 3 what?
I'm thinking it'll have 3 different flaps in it.
There you go.
Almost like a circle with 3 of them and they each open up.
Yeah, 3 of them and they open up. What shape do you think they would be based on the name tricuspid? Where do you have a cuspid? What's a cuspid? In your mouth, what's your cuspid?
Your teeth.
It's your canine tooth. It's your pointy one, right? So when you're looking at this, it is 3 coming together, like we said, but it's almost like 3 little triangular flaps that come together. So then your blood comes down into your right ventricle, which is where your first big pump is going to happen. There's a little pump here and a big pump here. That's why when you listen to your heart, you hear bump, 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 bump. There's a little pump and a big bump. So interestingly, does anybody know what a heart murmur is? Anybody have a heart murmur? You have a heart murmur, Shannon? I do too. Do you know what it is? You know, Bailey?
I can't remember. I used to know.
Beats or sometimes, usually a heart murmur is more along the lines of your valves are not, they're either not closing properly or they're just kind of not aligning right. So I actually have both the tricuspid and a mitral valve prolapse is what they call it. So that means like when these valves open up, they don't close quite in the right pattern, and I get a little backflow, just a little bit of backflow of blood. I actually had an echocardiogram to have it looked at, and you can see it on the echo. You can see it whooshing back. It's kind of cool. It's benign. Doesn't cause a problem. Does anybody know what common illness can cause heart valve problems? What got mine? Strep. Anybody had strep before? You had strep. You got to get your antibiotics in you fast. If you don't, if it goes on for too long, you can get heart valve damage. So for me, what it was is I was teaching preschool. One of my kids gave me strep. I went to a doc in the box because I was up visiting Jason. He was still at Tech and I was back in Virginia Beach. So he was up in Blacksburg. So that's where I got strep. Doc in the box gave me some antibiotic. Turned out I was allergic to it and I could add it to my list of allergies for antibiotics. And so I had to take a second antibiotic. So it finally went away, but it lasted longer than it normally would. And then I went back to work and I got reinfected by another kid. So then I had it all over again. So having it back to back and for that long caused enough damage that now you can hear a difference. And it was interesting because I didn't know until shortly after a doctor listened to me and he's like, how long have you had your heart murmur? I was like, oh, that's new. So there it is. So your blood's going to come down in here to your right ventricle, and then you're going to get a really, really big pump. And that's going to go right here. And this is called what? Anybody know what this is called?
Pulmonary artery.
Yep. So it says pulmonary artery there. But what color is it? So why is it an artery?
Because it's going
Wait,
out.
James is what? Because it's leaving the heart. Okay, these are your exceptions here. Your pulmonary artery and your pulmonary vein have different levels of oxygenation than all your other arteries and veins. It has to do with the artery going to and the vein coming to. The artery's leaving, sorry, vein coming in. So in this case, you have this artery that is deoxygenated blood, only place in your body where you've got that going on. And it pumps into two different directions. Where is it going?
Your lungs.
To the lungs. Okay, it's going to the lungs. And then when you get in the lungs, it's going to get, okay, so put hands up this time so other people have a chance. It gets oxygenated in your lungs. Then it comes back through these little red guys that are called pulmonary vein. Okay, it's a vein, but it's red, so you know that it's oxygenated blood. Where does that blood go next? From the pulmonary vein to where? Piper. Wait, Pepper, raise your hand.
Your limbs.
Nope, not yet.
The left atrium. Excuse me.
Yeah, your left atrium. So goes right here to your left atrium. This is kind of a smaller one, right? It gets a little pump here, comes down here into your left ventricle. Your left ventricle is your big pump. It's the big, strong, biggest pump. If you look at the muscles here in the walls of the atrium, you can see they're nowhere near as thick as the walls in the ventricles. That's because the ventricles are doing bigger pumps. They're pushing blood somewhere. And the atriums are just pushing it into the next chamber. So you get a really big push. And where does this blood go from your left ventricle?
Everywhere.
Well, first, it's going to go everywhere, but it's got to go through here first. What's this big guy? This is your aorta, right? So this is what pumps up to your aorta. And it's interesting. It's like a little crazy highway in here. It almost looks like Spaghetti Junction. But yeah.
Where does the aorta end? Right, it goes three split off.
It just splits. It starts to divide. Yeah.
Is it does it stop being called the aorta right at that split?
Yeah, they have names for all of these guys. I mean, if you were like a thoracic surgeon or cardiovascular surgeon or yeah, you'd know all these, every little thing here. And your aorta is going to be your very biggest valve vessel in your whole body. It's almost like it's big, guys. It's very big.
It's like your thumb.
Yeah, it's very, very big. And there are some people that will have like a condition, like a fast condition where it's kind of like aortic dissection, or they can have, things can happen like that where your aorta is suddenly affected by some kind of heart disease. And that's usually not a good outcome. You can imagine.
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, not a good outcome. All right. So your myocardium here, these are going to be your big muscles here. You also have a pericardium, which is going to be a sac that surrounds your heart. You've got usually peri tells you that it's like a membrane. You got a lot of those in different places in your body. So your next slide here, go. All right, so here we are again, and we're looking at this, which is pretty much what we just saw, just a little different. So the upper chambers that receive blood from the body, what are those called, Alex?
Atrium.
Those are your atriums. And then your lower chambers that pump blood out of the heart, Shannon, those are your ventricles. All right, good. So you guys have got it. Now this guy right here, here's our aorta again, right? So we know what it is. So what's the aorta do? It's the largest blood vessel in the body, pushes oxygen-rich blood to the body, which is what we were saying. And then you've got this fella here, your valves. All right, so your valves are here and here, your major ones. You also have some other kind of smaller ones. These are your major ones, and they separate atrium, ventricle. And these prevent the backflow of blood. You don't want backflow. It's trying to be, what's the word I want? Efficient, effective. It's not effective if it keeps swishing back in. So if you have a really bad heart murmur, really bad valve thing, they can go in and replace your valves. Does anybody know what the first big valve replacement was done with?
A pig.
Pig. It was a pig. Very good. They took a pig valve because it's kind of similar, pretty darn similar, and stuck it in and replaced one of these valves. They still use pig. I think they may use cadaver. I'm unsure. And I know that they're like everything else. They're working on like 3D printing with your own cells, stuff, all that crazy business. Yeah.
You keep on saying cadaver. I don't know what that is.
Cadaver's a dead body that's been donated to science. There you go. So, yep. What?
They've been able to 3D print cells, but only in space.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they also have artificial valves too that they can put in that function. So there are lots of ways to fix valve problems, which is good because valve problems aren't awesome. So in your heart here, Let's have a look here. That was weird. Where'd that go? SA node. Does anybody know what this is? This SA node right here, what it does?
Detects.
So it's not something that when you look at the heart, you see it like a structure. It's more of an area, kind of like on the back of your retina, there's an area called your fovea. That's where everything sort of concentrates. It's a big, highly innervated area. And it's basically your heart's built-in pacemaker. It tells your heart how fast to beat, how slow to beat. And this is getting a lot of feedback, obviously, from your nervous system and spreading it around to the muscles within your heart. And it's here, right here in the right atrium, because that's where it all starts. So it makes sense that it's there in the first place. And it tells your heart to beat. Now,
Wait,
but
how many nerves are in the heart?
oh goodness, I don't know.
Like a lot?
Oh
It's
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Now you can see this beat and it's gonna cut it. This is what you heard earlier, Jason. You were like, what was that? It divides it different ways. You can really see it. It's pretty cool. You can see the valves functioning, which is neat. So your tricuspid over there with the 3. See how that 3? There you go. So now I'll ask you this before we get to it. There will be a slide about it. But what's a heart attack? What causes a heart attack? Anybody know? Shannon, wanna go? Nah. So let me ask you. Your heart's made of muscle, right? Okay. What keeps muscle healthy?
Protein?
Well, yeah, protein, but I mean,
Amino acid.
it's what gives it its nutrients, takes away its waste, brings oxygen to it. What? Blood. Okay. So your heart has to basically pump blood to itself, right? Like it's a muscle and it has to take care of itself. So you've got big arteries and decent sized veins and stuff that run through your heart that have capillaries and go to all the muscle tissue of your heart. So your Cole, put it up. Your whatever you're giggling with,
Why is it purple?
because that's a blood orange. It's red inside. It's really cool. They're actually very tasty. So anyway, sorry, y'all are good laughing at something. So you've got muscle and the muscle has to be taken care of. Your coronary arteries, it runs kind of down right here and it branches. And your coronary artery, you've got a couple branches and you got your main part. If you have cholesterol that clogs or blood clots or whatever, if it forms in that artery, then your heart muscle can't get what it needs. That's a heart attack. When your heart muscle stops getting oxygen nutrients and part of the muscle dies or gets weak. So
How
Hmm?
how often does that happen to non-heart muscles? Is it more common to happen in heart muscles or more
I
common to
mean,
happen in
yes,
muscles?
because that's where everything's flowing to. But I mean, yeah, it can happen. It can happen. If you cut blood flow off to any part of your body, it's going to cause a problem. Like blood clots, they're extraordinarily painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get blood clots in your legs, you can get a blood clot like in your legs are most common, but you can get it anywhere. And if you get a blood clot in a vessel that gets freed and pumped through the heart into your lungs, it's a pulmonary embolism, and that's not good either. That can take you out. Now your mom had awful blood clot
Yeah, no, she had like,
for like 2 months of
yeah, no, she had like
Hell,
more
basically.
blood clots.
yeah.
And she literally like, when she got to the hospital, it was like, she had like one that was like, she had a few in her lung.
Mm-hmm.
And they literally were like, yeah, if you came to us like a day later.
Yep.
I don't think you would want-"
Yep, she had big ones. It was very scary. So oxygen poor blood from the body, where does it go to? Goes through your superior or inferior vena cava and it goes to where?
Right in your lungs. Left.
Let's all do it together. Now you're looking at it and you're going left, right. This is the person. So you can think of it as like stage left, stage right if you're the audience, if that helps you, if you do theater.
Yeah.
But basically, when you're looking at this, it's backwards. So what side is this? This is the right side, right? Okay, so it's your right atrium, right? And then where does it go?
Do you like ventricle?
Your right ventricle. And then where does it go? Michael, pulmonary artery to your what? Where's the pulmonary artery go to what?
The lungs.
Yep, to your lungs. Good deal. Okay, so here we go again. Now it's coming from your lungs. Where does it go? From your lungs to your Bailey. To your left ventricle, left atrium first, actually. Sorry, left atrium first because it's going to gather up there. Remember, gather up before the doors open, and then it's going to go to your left ventricle. Then where does it go? Anybody, Michael?
Aorta.
To your aorta. And then where's the aorta take it, Piper? To the rest of your body. Where are you, Piper? Here's your file. All right, so it goes everywhere else. Excellent. Now, it takes about 20 seconds for a red blood cell to circle the whole body.
Wow.
Think about that. All right, now, you have a headache. You take a Tylenol. You got to wait like 20 minutes before it takes effect, right? Why is that? Because it's going through what?
The digestive system.
Yeah, it's going through your digestive system, which means it's going to take a little while to get
Dissolve and be
some
able to
effect. Anybody ever had a surgery where they put a mask on you and give you some gas and you knock right out? Yep. That's so fast. Why is they tell you count backwards from 10? Most people get to like 8. So why is it so fast? It's because your lungs, right? You got all those capillaries there, and they're collecting all kinds of bloods there exchanging, and now you have that gas in there. Now, always remember concentration gradient, right? So everything wants to be balanced on either side of the membrane. So if you have too much CO2 here, it wants to go over here. If you have too much oxygen here, it wants to go over here. So this is what's happening in your lungs at a tiny microscopic level. Same thing if they pump propofol or whatever the heck it is, and it hits here. Well, there's none over here, so it's going right through to balance, right? So that's why it's so fast. Suddenly that's hit your whole body, and you're like, dunk. Has anybody ever had the same experience like with an IV and being knocked out? Yeah, I did that. They popped a little IV in me for my wisdom teeth, and she came in and she went to inject the little, they leave a little thing hanging off, and so I'm sitting there and she comes in and she said, in just a minute, you're going to feel a little bit goofy. She didn't get the second syllable of goofy out of her mouth before I was like, oh, like it. So that's why it's so fast. 20 seconds to cycle through your whole body. So it doesn't take long. That's also why, like in movies and stuff, you see people that are using illicit drugs and they like immediately have the effect. That's the same thing. It's super fast. Yeah.
So where would you inject to get the farthest away from the heart? Like your toe?
Yeah, you can do down into your ankles and stuff. Yeah, they can do that. Some like illicit drug users will go between their toes because it's a place, they don't have any other places they can go and you can't see it. Like it's not visible, highly visible to people who are looking at them. So that's one thing they do, because a lot of times, they'll have track marks or whatever where they've stabbed and stabbed again, and those veins just they have too much scar tissue, so they don't work as well anymore. Yeah, so they can do that, but they also can use like these big femoral arteries and femoral veins. These are what they use if they're doing they're doing like laparoscopic heart surgery. So they can go in, they can actually put like a tube in through this artery, and they can send it up all the way up backwards against your blood flow through your aorta down into your heart. They can find those coronary arteries or wherever you're having a problem. They can go in and expand a little balloon, or they can put a stent in. Like my dad has 3 stents in his heart, and they're like little, almost like a little, like those Chinese finger traps. It looks kind of like that, but it's like a mesh, and they go where you've had coronary arteries weakened or stiffened, and they'll put that in so it keeps the flow open. So they can do that all by putting a little cut down like in your groin. They can do it from there and run it all through, which is crazy because in the past they had to crack you open every time, right?
Me too.
Yeah, the brains.
Oh yeah, your brain. They can do brain surgery that way too. It's crazy. It is nuts to think they could do that. And so let me ask you this: why are they choosing to run those tubes through arteries and not veins?
Brains have valves.
Veins have valves. That's right. It would be too difficult. It would be a real.
You know what to remember the word.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, and the veins are going in the wrong direction.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, they take basically a mirror image path, but it's the valves that are going to be a real problem. Like if they're doing this all the time, you're not going to get your little tube or whatever, your camera, whatever you're putting through.
Muscles, or are they made of the
It's more like the same tissue, connective tissue kind of. Yeah. So what do we typically see in red? What's typically shown in red? Piper? Arteries are typically shown in red, right? And they carry blood from the heart to the tissues. All right, so what's in the middle? Anybody else know? Michael?
Capillary.
Okay, right, capillaries. Capillaries are your tiniest vessels, and these are what join your arteries and your veins. They come together like this. They just sort of touch, barely, enough to give you that membrane so you can have that concentration gradient, because that's what you're looking for. So if you've been running, okay, and your muscles are getting tired, this side is your arteries, this side is your veins, okay? You are running, you're getting tired, your muscles are like, oh, I need more oxygen, okay? They're sending messages to the brain, I need more oxygen. What do you start doing? You're breathing harder and harder and harder. So now you've got more oxygen coming in, and you've got your concentration gradient on this side is increased, and it's going to go to the other side, and that's how you're going to make sure that you're getting what you need, right? So
capillaries are also what burst when you have a bruise.
yes, absolutely. When you have a bruise, it's broken capillaries. Also, if you have
Is that why it's purple and not blue or red?
no, no, it's just under your skin. That's a good question though. Also, do you know what petechia are?
No.
So you can get petechia from a struggle, but like say you're a little kid's like fighting the dentist. I won't name which kid did this, but fighting the dentist, you can come out with these little burst capillaries. They're like little red spots, little marks all over around your face. You can also have blood vessels burst in your eyes, little capillaries burst in your eyes. And that actually is something that like medical examiners look at, because it tells you whether or not there was strangulation involved. Because if you strangle somebody, you're going to get petechial. They call them petechial hemorrhages, and that's what that is.
That was my grandma's name.
So your veins are typically shown in blue, and they carry blood from the heart, from the body to the heart. Which artery is shown in blue?
Veins.
Which artery is
Which
shown in
artery?
blue?
The
James,
Pulmonary
pulmonary artery. Okay, so then obviously you know which vein is shown in blue. Pulmonary vein, right? Okay, so check this out. All right, here's your artery, here's your vein. You look at your artery, do you see how thick the walls are?
Yeah.
They're thick, they're muscular, they're strong. That's because there's a lot of pressure in there. Blood is being pumped right through them. Now here's your veins. The walls are not so thick, but you see these little valves that keep your blood flowing in one direction. This is why if you stand on your head or do whatever you need to do, the blood doesn't go the wrong way, or blood in your legs is still coming back up to your heart. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Is there less need for muscles in the vein because of the valves?
Yeah, there's less need because it doesn't stretch as much either. Like your arteries need to be able to expand and stretch a little bit,
Yeah.
and your veins just kind of keep going. That's why when you can feel the pulse in your neck, that's every one of these pushes through those little valves, right? Through your veins, you can feel that. So you can see how thick your artery is compared to your vein. So here's your pressure. Let's look at your pressure here. Yeah.
Why would the vein not have to stretch as much as the artery if it's the same amount of blood going to the blood?
Because the pressure coming to it is not as high. So when you get your blood pressure taken, does anybody know what the like average perfect wannabe blood pressure is for adults? It's 120 over 80, right? Close. So the first number is the pressure in your arteries. It's your systolic. It's kind of your at rest. It's like your pump and you're at rest. So it's almost like your artery and your vein, but it's really your pump. That first systolic pressure, the first number is always higher because that's your pump. So it's much higher pressure when you're pumping versus when you're not pumping. But when you're not in a pump, this stuff's still kind of scooting along doing its thing over here. So look here at the pressure though. Here's what you need to see. So when the pressure's highest in which of your blood vessels? Aorta, but which type? I'm sorry, let me put it that way. Which type of vessel? James. Arteries are going to have your highest pressure. So considering that, what's going to have your lowest pressure?
Veins.
Your veins. Okay, so now here's the next question. Whoop, that went the wrong way. I was about to say what comes between arteries and capillaries? Arterioles. These went the wrong direction. Yes, that's where your arteries branch. So if this is your artery, these are your arterioles, and little tiny capillaries come off the end.
Yeah.
Here's your venule. That's their smaller version of your vein, and then here's your vein. Same thing happens. You've got bronchi and then bronchioles,
Yeah.
right? When they get smaller and smaller. So anybody remember, probably had it done, you go to the doctor, they prick your finger, they bring out that little capillary tube. It's that tiny, tiny, tiny glass tube. They touch it and you see capillary action because it sucks your blood right up. The next thing they actually do is they take that little tube and they tap the bottom of it into some putty, and that putty like makes a plug. Then they take it to a centrifuge. Anybody know what a centrifuge is? James knows. It spins it. it spins it really fast. So when you're spinning it really fast and you've put it in, like say this is the top, this is the bottom, you put it in like this and it starts spinning really fast, it forces the more dense components down to the bottom, the less dense ones to the top, right? Because it's like a gravity effect. So what happens is your blood separates into its elements just like this. So at the top you have your plasma because it's your least dense. Then you have what they call the buffy coat. This is your white blood cells and your platelets. And then your red blood cells are most dense. Yeah.
Does capillary action happen in the capillary?
Yes. That's why they're capillary action. Yep. There you go. So this is, see how there's marks on here like a ruler? This is actually how they measure your hematocrit, which is how many red blood cells you have. It's literally like measuring it on a ruler because you've got this like this thing going on. So if it's normal, they have a range for normal and it's a percentage, right? They'll take a percentage based on these actual numbers, measurements here. If you're anemic, you're going to have a lower hematocrit. And if you have polycythemia, which is elevated hematocrit, it'll look like that.
How come blood is red if it's supposed to be the plasma?
These just have a lot of pigment, I guess. They're erythrocytes, right? Red blood cells are called erythrocytes. And they're just, I guess they're so pigmented enough that you don't really even see the plasma. I mean, there's a lot of them in it. And like when we looked at it under the microscope, you could see all those red blood cells and there was space in between. It's not really space, it's the plasma, right? So this is where everything is that's basically not cells or platelets. It's all your hormones, nutrients, water. So you've got 4 to 6 liters of blood in your body. And it's composed of your plasma, your red blood cells, and then your white blood cells. And so these 4 to 6 liters are typical. Now, this is the other thing, here's your other interesting medical examiner fact. So we know how much volume a typical human body has, and we know how much volume a typical human being can lose and still be alive. So there have been cases where like they can't find the body. They think this person's dead, but then maybe just they walked off. Maybe they're just missing and they decided to go, I don't want to deal with these people anymore. But if you find, and they have in cases found blood, like on the underneath side of a mattress or whatever, they can tell by the volume of the blood whether or not that person lived through whatever caused them to bleed. And they can tell by the DNA if it's the person. So no body murder cases are very difficult to try because you don't have a body, so you don't have all the pathology information from it, which makes it difficult. But if you can say, well, there were roughly 4 liters of Jane's blood on this bed, you know Jane's not alive and that's Jane's blood. So that's one of the ways they get through no body trials, which are really difficult. So here's a little fun fact, historical fact for you. Milk and young coconuts can be used as a substitute for plasma. How'd they figure this out? In India in World War II when blood supplies were running low. I guess they were trying anything. Let's just inject some coconut milk. We don't have anything else. What the heck? Let's give it a try. When you're desperate, you do whatever you want to do.
Some part was the first guy to get milk from a cow.
Yeah. I've always wondered who did that. Who was the first person to go, that looks good. I don't think I'll try that.
The babies.
Yeah. There you go. So composition of blood, again, typically, it's about 55% plasma. So a little over half of your blood is liquid. And you have your 1%, your platelets, and your red blood cells are about 45%. And then you have your white blood cells, and they're big like that.
How dense are red blood cells?
You what? How dense?
Yeah, are they strong?
They're definitely more dense than the other components, which is why they go all the way to the bottom. I don't know how dense specifically, but these guys have a lot of cytoplasm in them because they're pretty big. Looking at them, this one has 2 nuclei, so that's an eosinophil. I think this one is probably like a lymphocyte. There's all different kinds of white blood cells.
So, I have a question about the photo.
Yeah.
That doesn't add up to 100.
Hmm.
Calculation. Is that-
1 and 1. Wow. Okay. Oh, God. Oh, maybe it's because they've taken averages here. So you've got 40, what do we have? 47 and 55. So this is probably an average range. So these numbers could be a little different in each one. I think that's what they've done there. That is a little weird though. Good call. So your fluid component is your plasma. That's where your nutrients in your water are. Yeah. So your red blood cells are going to carry your hemoglobin and transport your oxygen. And then your white blood cells, what do? They're your immune cells, right? There's a lot of immune stuff going on in there. And they are going to fight your infection and whatnot. Look at the shape first of this red blood cell. You know, they look kind of like, I always say they look like donuts that didn't get punched all the way through. It's almost like a basket for the hemoglobin molecules. It really is. So when they don't have this shape, this is when you have problems like sickle cell. They're not this shape. They can't carry as much hemoglobin. So anyway, your platelets, here they are. We could clearly see some of those in Claire's blood smear. They were really, really clear. They're these little funky looking deals. So if you get damage to a vessel wall, capillaries, doesn't matter. What you're going to get, these platelets are going to come along. They're going to collect in one spot like this. And they have all of these fibers that they sort of explode themselves. They're like little kamikaze things. And they kind of explode and they make this fibrous network that causes a clot. And you want this to happen if you're injured. You want this to happen to cells that are, to vessel walls that are damaged. If you've got, obviously blood clots in other parts of your body, that could be an issue. So you don't want low platelets because then you could bleed out. That's not fun. So they stick to broken blood vessels. They're essential in clotting. So lymph, what's lymph? All right. Your lymphatic system typically in diagrams is shown in green or kind of yellow green. Why
do they stick to broken blood vessels but not fixed blood vessels?
I'm not even sure. I'm sure that's some chemical thing that's telling them go here, go there. It gets so picky. You could probably spend a year studying just that. Probably could. So they typically show lymphatic system in like green or yellow green. If you feel like from the soft spot under your ear and your jaw come down like about an inch and tuck up under your jaw, you may be able to feel some lymph nodes there. They're like little bean sized. If you they're soft if you're not sick.
No, you gotta like correct your chin forward a little.
I can still feel them. I can still feel them.
You know the things that you can feel under your skin?
They're kind of like I got one right here. So if, when you go to the doctor and you're sitting there on the little table and he comes up or she comes up and goes like this, that's what they're doing. They're feeling for your lymph nodes. If you're really sick, those suckers will pop out and you'll see them. That's really bad. But when they're swollen, it's because they're working. All right. So it's a sign of infection, which these are the ones they check because these are the ones they check because they're really easy. But you've also got them in your armpits. You got them in your groin, all kinds of places. When I got my COVID shot in my left armpit hurt for like a week because those lymph nodes were acting up. Yeah, really deep, and you couldn't get to it. It was awful. It was like, so your lymphatic system, this is where you've got fluid that contains nutrients, sometimes microorganisms. That's probably not good. Obviously you want some flora in your body. They say flora in your body, like you want some bacteria and stuff that are good in your intestines, but you don't want parasites floating around. That's not a great thing. They are filtered through your lymph nodes, which is why they swell up when you're sick. Your lymph nodes are filters. They're doing a lot of work, so they're expanding. And where's the other one? Okay, good lymph is returned back to your blood. You want lymph, it's good stuff. So I have an awesome Amoeba Sisters. You got to love Amoeba Sisters. This one's a little longer than most, but it sums everything up.
Did you have breakfast this morning?
Yes.
Did you ever wonder after you eat breakfast and your food is digested?
You're funny.
How is that
Yes.
glucose getting transported around your body? Or as you take a breath in, how does that oxygen get transported around? Or when you exhale, how does that carbon dioxide get transferred out? Are these only questions I ponder during breakfast? Maybe. But your circulatory system is absolutely fascinating and highly involved in this. In this short intro video of the circulatory system, we will mention some basics about its functions and trace the pathway of how blood travels through your heart. But please note, before we get started, there are gigantic textbooks on the circulatory system itself. So obviously this video is just an intro. We're going to first talk about the blood, the medium of how we transport glucose and gases. As we mentioned in our body systems intro video from many years ago, there are some misconceptions. Human blood is red and always red, although the shade of red can vary. based on how much oxygen is in the blood. Veins and arteries are often drawn in diagrams as blue or red to show whether they have lower or higher concentrations of oxygen. But that's just how it is used in most diagrams. It doesn't mean the blood or the veins or the arteries are actually that color. Veins that you see under your skin may look blue or green, but that involves the way they appear under the skin. And the reason for this would make a great physics topic, but I digress. Human blood has a lot of functions. It maintains a certain pH, temperature, osmotic pressure. All of this is very important for homeostasis. It transports things like hormones, nutrients, and gases. And it's made up of different components. One component includes plasma, the liquid portion. Water, proteins, salts, lipids, you'll find them in this liquid portion of blood known as plasma. Another component includes cellular components. This means red blood cells, which do the transporting of gases, white blood cells, which can fight infections, and platelets, which are actually cellular fragments, and they're involved with helping your blood clot. Very important when there is damage to the body. Red blood cells have an iron-containing protein called hemoglobin, and that is where the red
love that.
coloring of blood comes from. So when we're talking about blood and we're just introing the circulatory system, we're going to focus on how this blood moves around in the human body. Human heart anatomy observes the heart divided into two distinct and separated partitions, a deoxygenated or low oxygen partition and an oxygenated partition. There are some human congenital heart conditions that can result in this oxygenated and deoxygenated blood mixing, however. More on that at the end. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Think A for away. Arteries are typically oxygen rich, but there are exceptions. Veins generally carry blood to the heart. Veins typically are oxygen poor, but there are exceptions. Capillaries are small blood vessels, and it is at the capillary level where oxygen is delivered to organs and tissues and where carbon dioxide will be picked up to travel back to the lungs. So looking at this heart, the right side, and that's the person's right, so for you it will look opposite, pumps deoxygenated blood, and the left side pumps oxygenated blood. We can also see four chambers,
Fish tank pump.
right atrium and right ventricle, and the left atrium and the left ventricle. I like to remember that A comes before V in the alphabet, so that helps you remember that A's for atria are at the top of the heart, V for ventricles are at the bottom of the heart. Atria also have thinner walls than the thicker wall ventricles. The heart also contains valves, which we'll see when we get to tracing the pathway of blood. The valves are one-way structures that help separate the chambers and also prevent backflow of blood. Ready to take the adventure of a lifetime, an adventure tracing the pathway of blood through the heart? We're going to start with blood that is in a human code. This blood is deoxygenated. It needs to get to the heart so that it can be pumped to the lungs to pick up the oxygen and then be spread throughout the body. It's going to get there through the vena cava, inferior vena cava to be specific, as the superior vena cava is above the heart. The blood enters the right atrium. The right atrium contracts, pushing the blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle contracts, pumping the blood through the pulmonary valve to the pulmonary artery. By the way, when you see the word pulmonary, it likely involves lungs. The pulmonary artery takes blood to the lungs. The lungs are where red blood cells in the blood will take on oxygen and release carbon dioxide. Now this blood is oxygenated. It needs to return to the heart so that the heart can pump it throughout the body. The oxygenated blood travels through a pulmonary vein to the left atrium. The left atrium contracts and the blood travels through the mitral valve, also known as the bicuspid valve, into the left ventricle. The left ventricle contracts and pumps the blood through the aortic valve and out a major artery known as the aorta. The aorta is a major artery that carries oxygenated blood throughout the body. Now, I don't want to neglect the fact that the heart needs its own blood supply for delivery of oxygen and glucose. The heart can receive this blood supply through coronary arteries. Coronary arteries branch off the aorta and eventually deliver blood into capillaries. These capillaries deliver oxygen and glucose to the heart. Coronary veins will take the deoxygenated blood to the right atrium, where the blood will eventually travel a pathway to become oxygenated. In fact, to quiz yourself, can you pause the video and trace the pathway of blood again, starting with the right atrium?
Y'all can do it.
Okay, all together. Right atrium,
Tricuspid
tricuspid valve,
valve,
right ventricle, pulmonary valve, pulmonary artery, lungs, back through the pulmonary vein, left atrium, mitral valve, left ventricle, aortic valve, aorta. Takes us to the body, and then it will eventually return through the vena cava back to the right atrium again. Whew, it almost makes you want to turn it into a song, but we won't. The significance of the pathways, how we interact, the coordination of contraction, and many more elements are part of every beat of your heart. A human heart beats over 100,000 times per day, so it's significant that every beat is coordinated and blood is directed where it should go. The complexity of the cardiac cycle, which is the coordinated sequence of the heart's contractions and relaxations, isn't something this short video can go into. Hopefully a separate video on that soon. One last thing, there are many conditions in which the heart doesn't function correctly. Anatomically, some heart conditions change the pathway flow of blood. One example that we have mentioned before is an atrial septal defect. The septum is the muscular wall that separates the right and left side of the heart. So a septal defect could mean an opening, and oxygen-rich blood could mix with oxygen-poor blood. Depending on the size, this can cause further problems, such as an abnormal heartbeat, stroke, or potentially heart failure in severe cases. Some medications can help the symptoms, or surgery can be an option. There continues to be more advancements for treating cardiovascular conditions. If you have interest in the amazing field of cardiology, take a look at the suggested further reading links in the video details. Well, that's it for the Muva Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Okay, so I have a thought for you. Boop. Okay. I know, only one sister. Shows is talking. The other one is like in the background. So I have a question.
The other one's John.
How would a, listen, I want you to think about it. How would a fetal heart differ from an infant heart? Think about it for a minute.
It's on the mother's side.
The infant heart is going to be pretty much like yours, or should be. So how would a fetal heart be different? Cole?
It's connected to the mother's heart.
Not really.
Oh, yeah, it's its own heart.
It has its own heart. Is it breathing air?
Oh, yeah, it's not what.
No,
all the
it's not breathing air. Where's the oxygen coming from? Bailey. Mom, through what? Umbilical cord and the placenta. Okay, so you're not breathing air into your lungs. So what's going on there? How are you getting oxygen? Think about it. How would that fetus get up? What would be the difference in the structure of the heart?
The umbilical cord goes straight into the pulmonary vein.
So all of that, all of those roadways, that piping we saw that gets the blood from the heart to the lungs to the heart.
Yeah.
There's actually an anatomical difference in a fetal heart. It's almost like a little hole that lets blood go from one side to the other without having to go through all of the lung stuff. That closes almost instantaneously at birth. If it doesn't close, it's a defect, and it's a more common one. I can't remember the name right now, but it's a more common one. It's really kind of interesting. It's one of those things that, like, when the umbilical cord is cut, the body triggers it to just close up, which is kind of wild if you think about it. So respiratory system, let's talk lungs. Respiratory system. All right, so your respiratory system, what are these little guys, do you know?
Alveoli.
Alveoli, right? Okay, so these are where you've got your connections. This is where you've got all your blood vessels, teeny, all in there, doing all your capillaries, exchanging of gases. So controls what kind of exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide? What's that? Oh, shoot. Between, sorry. My very brain went dead. Blood, air, and tissues. Yeah.
Gas?
There we go. Okay, so we're controlling gas exchange. Good one. All right. So this is your oxygen, carbon dioxide between your blood, your air, and your tissues. Keep concentration gradient in your brain all the time, especially when it comes to this sort of stuff, because that's what matters every time. So we're going to look at an air pathway here. Woo, we're going to see it for a minute because I put it on float. Don't know why. Actually, I did it first before I went back and gave y'all boxes. So we're going to start up here. Okay. So we're going to start with the nose, where it goes through the nose and the mouth, and then it's going here next. What's this area called?
The trachea.
Before the trachea, that's next. Shannon,
I don't know how to say it.
guess.
Those are the key.
Pharynx. Yep. Okay. So this is, remember your pharynx is, it's the part of your throat where your digestive and respiratory systems are still connected. It's before your esophagus and trachea branch off. Then you get your larynx. What's your larynx? It's your voice box, right? Okay. So your larynx is, your vocal cords are actually, they actually open and close as part of your breathing process. Your vocal cords open and close like this. It's almost like a V-shaped thing. And I'm going to tell you this now, and you're going to hear it for the rest of your life, and you're going to be annoyed. But singers, you should not hear a sound when they inhale, because they should completely relax their larynx so they can drop air in, and then, you know, close it back up and stretch depending on pitch. But if you ever hear a singer go, or you hear those breathing sounds, like even on recordings, that's a bad thing. And that can actually cause vocal damage. You want to hear a great example of that. There's an Ed Sheeran song, Galway Girl, live. There's a live Galway Girl recording where you can hear him. That's a fast song, right? So he's taking quick breaths, quick catch breaths, and you can hear through the whole thing. There's also the, and I'm just waiting for him to need surgery. There's also, if he does that all the time, there's also the Tony performance for the first year that Wicked was out. And Idina Menzel went up and she was doing the big defying gravity number. You can hear her inhaling so much. And she did end up with vocal damage after that show. And if you listen to that, it's like, oh, well, there you go. So from your larynx, that's where Piper was saying you go to your trachea, right? So your trachea, what's another word for trachea? Windpipe. There you go. Yep. Okay. So then it goes to your bronchi. All right. So this is where we branch off here. And after your bronchi or your bronchioles, but in this case, it's just going to talk about, it goes generally to the lungs, spreads to all your lung tissue. Then where do we go?
Into the pulmonary capsule.
We're getting there. Yep. It's spreading to bronchioles. It's not the best example.
What?
These are little ones. So from your bronchi to your bronchioles, these are little ones.
Are the bronchi in the lungs though? Are the bronchi not in the lungs?
They are, but they're not. So it's almost like, how do I describe it to you? They're inside the lungs, but they are closed off. So it's like they plunge into the tissue, but then the branching comes later.
Yeah.
Almost like a taproot into the ground, right? So your bronchioles are where your bronchi branch off, right? And they go all through the tissue as well. And then that's where you get the alveoli at the end, which are the little sacs. The amount of branching is crazy. And it gets, just like in your blood vessels, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner, like with capillaries. It's the same concept. It's just air and not, it's a different fluid. It's air and not liquid. So structures. So right here, we are looking at your pharynx. There's Shannon's word. So it's this little dude area right here. This is you breathe through here, you swallow through here.
It's where your epiglottis is.
It's where your epiglottis is. Your epiglottis is this little deal here that closes. When does it close? When you do what?
Swallow.
When you swallow. You can't help it. If you swallow, it closes. Why does it close?
Choke or drown.
Yes, so you don't choke or drown. It's so you don't get food down the wrong tube. Now, when it doesn't close properly and you do get a little bit of liquid or whatever in there, that's when you're like, right at dinner or whatever, you drink wrong and you swallow, wrong pipe. My husband has a weird thing where he does that like 4 times a day. I don't know what, I've told him 100 times, something's wrong with your epiglottis. He went and had some swallow study. They couldn't find anything. I was like, no lies. There was something wrong with it because you all the time. Does he not choke constantly on liquid? Your father? Yeah, all the time. It's bizarre. So anyway, and then this is your passage for both air and food. Then what happens? You go to your larynx if it's air. And like I was saying, it opens like this, closes like this. I actually had the opportunity several years ago. I got a viral infection and it caused a lesion on my left vocal cord. And I knew something was wrong because, you know, when I sing, so I could tell. there was a difference somewhere. It was in what's called for a singer, it's called their passaggio. It's like their middle range. So I knew something was up. So I went to this otolaryngologist at the Emory Voice Center, which is a thing, an otolaryngologist, Emory Voice Center, all the way down to Midtown. But she numbed my throat, like sprayed it. And then she stuck this camera that was like on a stick and looked down and had a light into my throat and looked down until she could see my larynx, which was pretty cool. And then she had me do like sing sirens, like, oh, high as you can go, as low as you can go, up and down, up and down. And it was wild because the machine that was in there was recording the pitch, and you could see the hertz change with the pitch. And then you could see, you could actually see it on the video. There was a video and I was looking at it, which was really weird. And she said to me, you know, like, where is your problem? And I said, it's like right around A natural. I can't tell you, but that's where every time I sing that note, it feels weird. And this is where your physics and your biology come together. Yeah. So you could actually see in there's like a little graph that goes like this as the pitch went up and pitch went down. There was a spot where it was like kind of funky. Yeah. And she stopped it and it was at 440 hertz. 420 hertz. A natural is 440. So I was really close, which was really neat. So if you ever get any kind of like voice therapy done, you get a chance to see that, which is cool because most musicians see their instrument every day. And that's the only time I've ever seen mine. So it was really neat. So your larynx is your voice box. You got your 2 vocal cords. They do this. And you don't want to be like coughing or clearing your throat too much because that can make them all unhappy too. So what's next? What's next is your trachea, which is your windpipe. What now? You're laughing at making your cords unhappy? Yeah. I don't like unhappy cords. I don't like unhappy cords. Eventually the lesion went away, but I had to do voice therapy to make it go away, which was also a weird thing. Voice therapy is a really weird thing. It's like physical therapy, but for your cords. He referred to it as recalibrating. You tuned an instrument and you recalibrate it. You have to do the same thing with internal ones, which is very interesting. So your trachea is your windpipe. It's covered by your epiglottis, so you don't have things go down the wrong pipe. And then your bronchi are your 2 big tubes that lead into each lung. So what's next after that? Your bronchioles. They branch down into these little branches like this. This is a great graphic. Can I make it bigger? It's really a good graphic. And they've cut it open there so you can see the inside of your alveoli. That's pretty cool. That's a good one. It's hard to find good graphics. So your tiny little air sacs at the end of your bronchioles, that's where your gas exchange occurs, right? And why does gas exchange in the alveoli? What makes it happen? What's the cause?
Concentration difference.
Bingo, concentration gradient. Concentration gradient is why it happens. It's the same reason that you pour salt on the slug and he dies, because all the water in his body comes out because it's trying to balance the salt solution on one side and the other. This is also why if you eat a lot of salt and a lot of sodium and you get it into, that obviously is going to get into your bloodstream because you're digesting it. And when that happens, you need to take in more water to balance the salt and your blood pressure goes up. That's why people with high blood pressure need to watch their sodium levels, right? You don't want that. So the capillaries are obviously covering them because that's the whole point. So the gas exchange, here's a good graphic that shows you how it happens. So it's obviously going to occur in the capillaries that cover up the alveoli. Your oxygen is going to diffuse into your blood. CO2 from your blood is going to diffuse into your lungs. And diffusion works across, everybody together, concentration gradient. Don't forget that one. I've said that like 5 or 6 times today. So what does that tell you?
It's important.
And it might what?
Beyond.
Hey, okay, there you go. So breathing, how does breathing work? All right. Your diaphragm is right in here, right? If you actually kind of tense up, you can feel your abdominal muscles, but you can almost feel your diaphragm. It's kind of under this epigastrium area. When your diaphragm is relaxed, it sucks way up into your chest cavity like this, sucks up high. And so if you exhale, it sucks up high. Now, the way it works is when it contracts, it pulls down. So you've got a closed system inside of you in here, right? And this is open to air outside. When your diaphragm contracts and pulls down, what happens? What does it create in here
A vacuum.
and a vacuum.
or
So,
a low pressure
You
area.
you tend to think about exhaling as being the work, like, really it's the inhaling that's the work, because it's that pulling down and contracting of the diaphragm causes that vacuum, and it sucks all that air in, just sucks it in. And then when it relaxes, the vacuum obviously leaves and it comes up and all the air comes back out. Now, your diaphragm's cool because it's one of those muscles that you can control, and then it's also autonomic. So it'll go on its own. You can sleep, think about it. You can lose parts of your brain and it still works. Does all kinds of stuff without you worrying about it. Phones down, people. But you can also control it, right? You can control when you're breathing or how deep you're breathing. Cole, put it up. So, oh, I don't care. This isn't Spanish. So anyway, your diaphragm, there you go. You can control it. You can also let it do it on its own. So it's at your base of the chest cavity. It contracts or expands to allow you to inhale and exhale. And we saw this. Now on your pig, do you remember seeing your diaphragm really clearly? You could see it really clearly, right? It was that it separated basically your thoracic cavity from your abdominal cavity. And that's how that works. Okay, beyond this. So what's a hiccup? Anybody get frequent hiccups? I get them all the time. So it's a spasm of your diaphragm. It's actually, I think it's a phrenic nerve, I think is what it is, that leads to your diaphragm, and it causes it to contract like quickly and kind of at the wrong time. So it's this quick rush of air through the vocal cords, and that's what causes the hic sound, right? Goes shooting through. I'm going to look up because I want to remember, what is that part of the heart that closes up? No. Screen sharing has stopped. I didn't tell you to stop screen sharing. Yeah, I know. I had that one backwards. I'm sure I can find you a graphic because it's really cool. Oh, it's not going to autofill. Oh, same thing. I missed it. So show me oh, here we go. Perfect. All right. So foramen, that's the name. I could not think of it. All right. So you've got this little thing called the foramen, and it's right here. It's a hole. It's a tube basically. And it brings these two systems together entirely. And then you have it closed here. Now, when it doesn't close, obviously it's causes problems. There's probably a great YouTube video about it. There is a movie that I like to show sometimes for biology class. It's called Something the Lord Made. Anybody know it?
No.
So it's got,
Oh, right.
I think it's Most Deaf and Alan Rickman, which makes it worth watching all on its, yeah, Most Deaf, I think it's Most Deaf, yeah, and Alan Rickman. And I didn't name him. And anyway, it's about the surgery that was developed to prevent blue baby condition, which has to do with the heart defect. And they use dogs and operate on the dogs and try and figure out how to make it work. But what's interesting about it is it was done in a time when Most Deaf, the actor, the character he's playing, is true story. The character he's playing is a Black man, and Alan Rickman obviously is a white man, if you know who Alan Rickman is. And so he's like sort of like the lab assistant versus the big doctor. And it's actually the assistant guy who figures it out, but it's the doctor who gets the credit. And it took years for them to come back and properly credit him. Let's see. There we go. That's a long one. I'm not doing that. Ah, there it is. Okay. If I can make it do, where is my, there it is. Okay. Here we go. All right. So this is pretty cool because it's different. Hello. What's up with you?
Your device is
The TV's not.
That's the problem. Everything went down for a minute. Okay, hold up. Probably lost everybody. Boy, that's weird. Doesn't want to find anything here. Hello. Oh no, Surface Pro, don't do this to me. Hold on. Let me give it a second. There it goes. There. Sure, I lost. 1 second. Nope. Nope. I don't know what's doing. Good times. Hold on. Know how to take your own pulse? Do you know what you do?
I used to.
What, wrist or neck or what?
I look at my watch.
It's easiest. Yeah, it's easy. Oh, your watch does it. It's easiest if you use a timer for 20 seconds and then you multiply by 3. Correct. Sydney's still in the Zoom. Okay, good. Glad to know you didn't get kicked out. Everybody lost the TV. So do you know how to find your radial pulse? So you come down by your thumb, you start here at this fleshy part, okay? And you slide down, you can feel that tendon. Slide down about 2 inches and you tuck your finger in. You see, can I feel it? No.
That's right, Mama.
Yeah, right about there. So you kind of gotta relax your arm. You can usually feel it like right about here. I can feel mine. It's very faint. It's right there. The other way is to get your jugular, which is kind of right under your ear here. You can tuck it, feel it in that soft spot where we were looking for lymph nodes before. You can slide down there and feel it. Yeah. So if you do that, you can feel your pulse, and then you can also you can time it, like I was saying. Here we go. Sorry, I don't know why you have low system resources. There wasn't a problem with it yesterday. It's giving me issues, and I don't know why. Making me mad. Good to know that the Zoom people didn't disappear. And that's going to do this first. Hold on, I got to get rid of the one that's here. Come on. I have to disconnect the living room in order for it to, okay, in order for it to reconnect it. I don't know why, every time. So if you do that, if you can find your pulse, anybody ever hear their pulse? Like you do something like, you know, you got something connected somehow and you can hear it.
Yeah,
That's weird. It's really weird, isn't it? Because it's loud.
Sometimes like right after exercise, or sometimes you can just randomly.
Yep. Yep. And it's really strange because it's like, good gracious, what's going on here?
Yeah, I can maybe feel it like if I'm like lying down with my like ear on a pillow.
Yep. So why do people she's still there. All right, Sydney, I'm coming. Why do people faint? Like if you're getting your blood drawn, for example, why do people faint if they're getting their blood drawn?
They're scared of the blood.
Because they're scared of the blood.
Blood pressure just drops.
Your blood, yeah. Why does your blood pressure drop?
Well,
Well, yeah, if you're taking a lot, it can be because there's less blood in there. Can you see it? It's coming. So if you're taking a lot of blood, it can be because there's less blood in there. It can also just be because your body does weird things when you're in shock and it thinks you're in danger. So if you're afraid or anxious,
Sends all the important
yep.
blood.
Where's all the blood going? Yeah, it's all going to the center of your body, right? That's why you start feeling like your fingers and your toes will tingle, and it's like, oh, here's a problem. All right, everybody can see now. Sorry, Sydney, that was bizarre. Got audio on. Okay, so this should be cool because this is going to show us fetal circulation. So here's what we're talking about. Thanks, Sarah.
Which is quite different to circulation when somebody's been born for a number of reasons. So I'm just going to talk about the structural differences.
Oh, look, she draws.
So here's a drawing I did earlier.
Oh.
Save a bit of time.
She's got a great accent.
And let's zoom in and have a look at the placenta, where oxygen nutrient-rich blood from the mother passes into the umbilical vein, which is this one that I'm showing you now, and that joins up with the inferior vena cava. I'll talk in a little bit more detail about the specifics of this later, but I want to get the basic structure down now first. So this is deoxygenated blood from the inferior vena cava, and this mixes with the oxygenated blood. So we get a kind of mixture, which I'll show you in purple. And there's a significant difference in the structure of the heart in before birth, and that's this hole between the two atria, known as the foramen ovale. So I'm just showing in rough detail where the vessels go here. So now I'm going to talk in some more detail about the specific path that this blood takes in the fetal circulation. So as I mentioned previously, oxygen and nutrient-rich blood from the placenta enters the umbilical vein. And from here, it travels via the liver. And this, by two different pathways, as I mentioned previously, a small proportion of the blood travels actually through the liver tissues, as it would in the hepatic portal system in a developed adult. But the liver isn't very developed at this point, so it's only necessary for a small proportion to travel through this way. The majority of blood actually bypasses the liver via a vessel known as the ductus venosus, which is an important one to remember. And this is good because it means that oxygen and nutrient-rich blood joins straight up with the inferior vena cava and gives us this mixture, as we talked about, of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. And what we want to do now is get this blood with its oxygen and with its nutrients to the tissue of the body immediately. So a small part of this blood goes via the pulmonary circulation, and I'll talk a little bit more detail slowly in a minute about this. But the key point is that we want the majority of blood to end up going via the aorta, which explains the change in structure in the fetal heart. So here we see the majority of blood passing through the foramen ovale and into the left side of the heart before entering the aorta. And also another change in the fetal circulation is this connection here between the pulmonary trunk and the aorta. And I'll talk about that in a second. So key points: the mixed blood, which is high in oxygen and nutrients, enters the right atrium. From here, some of this blood enters the right ventricle, and it then enters the pulmonary trunk and travels via the pulmonary circulation. We've got to remember, though, that the key thing we want to do is get the O2 and nutrients to the body as soon as possible. And in the fetus, the lungs aren't a place of gas exchange. All of the oxygen, all of the nutrients comes from the placenta. So we've already got that. We don't need to do the pulmonary circulation.
ASAP.
Or just oxygenate the blood. So the lungs in the fetus are actually full of water, or fluid anyway, and they're not the site of gas exchange, like I said. However, they do need a little bit of oxygen in order to help with their development. So you can see a little bit of this oxygenated blood going into the lungs and coming out deoxygenated. So as I said, the majority of the blood passes through the foramen ovale from the right atrium into the left atrium. It then travels into the left ventricle and out through the aorta. So just labelling on here the foramen ovale. In between the right and left atrium. Into the
She's so neat. I
and
don't know how she's so neat.
from here, it's then pumped out through the aorta and travels to the tissues of the body, where the oxygen and nutrients can be taken up by the cells that are respiring and growing. So any of the blood that didn't pass through the foramen ovale and instead into the pulmonary trunk can then pass through this connection between the pulmonary vessels and the aorta that I've drawn on here. And this is called the ductus arteriosus. And because the blood's at quite a high pressure at this point, it follows a pressure gradient and ends up entering the aorta. And this is good because we're really maximizing the amount of blood that's going to bypass the pulmonary circulation and enter the systemic circulation. So we've got this nutrient-rich blood traveling down through the abdominal aorta and traveling to the rest of the body. And to complete our circulation
I did not touch that.
circuit, here are the iliac arteries which branch, and here's the internal iliac artery. And branching from the internal iliacs are the umbilical arteries. Now at this point they're pretty low in oxygen because they've been to all the tissues. So these return to the placenta. And this, like I said, these little rings, the umbilicus, the white one. And it's sort of, there's two umbilical arteries, and these kind of twist all around the umbilical vein. And it travels
Umbilical,
through the
she
placenta
says.
and drops off its waste products. And then in the placenta, we're back to square one. The umbilical vein picks up all the good stuff. So
It's
there
cool
we
to
have
see.
it.
You can see there, you've never got, a fetus has never got fully, oh, y'all losing your mind over there. A fetus has never got fully oxygenated blood circulating. It's only partially oxygenated, which is interesting because that's where all this development and stuff is going on. You would think you would need some more highly oxygenated blood, but you're also, they're not doing a lot of work, right? They're just kind of floating and hanging out. So they don't really need all that. But yeah, so she kept saying umbilical. I love That's like advertisement, umbilical, umbilical, and which is say umbilicus instead of umbilicus. That was really interesting. Okay, British people. So yeah, so that's a, it's funny. But anyway, there is a, like I said, you can have real issues with that. And I'm trying to remember the name of the exact condition, but that causes the problems. But this is in the way. In the way. There we go. What's it called? It's a very, I actually got to see when I was doing an internship with the pediatrician, I actually got to see a baby that had this problem.
With the hole in the heart still there?
Yeah.
In the atrium walls?
Yep.
Yeah.
Here it is. It's called, yeah, they call it PFO. Oh, there it is. Patent foramen ovale. That's that. But then they call it a PFO something, PFO condition or PFO disorder or PFO something. But yeah, it's definitely an issue because it can cause all kinds of problems. And you obviously need that to stop. You need that to close at birth.
Yeah.
But, and it does, it will close at birth. But if it doesn't, that's an issue. Let's see, here. What are you laughing at now?
This Jackie was just really loud there for a second.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
So they actually they close it up, and this is how they do it. There, this is the cool one. No, this one's mostly graphic, I think. Graphics, not graphic. It may be graphic too, but they have to fix it surgically because if it doesn't fix on its own.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it is neat. They use like a little, see, it's like they put a little disc in there and they close it up.
they can fix.
Yeah, there it is. Here we go. It's pretty amazing how they do it.
Oh, this person.
So again, they- yeah. Yeah, it's a big person, right? So they're gonna show it right here. See, it's like, oh, we need that. Oh, that's a problem. It's usually not a very big hole that's left behind, but sometimes it's just a little bit. And so in this case, they don't want that little hole, so they're gonna have to close it up. Show me how you do it. Here you go. Uh-oh. That's not good. That's gonna cause a clot, and then you can have issues because why are we doing that? Here's how we fix it. See, here we go. What do we do? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Oh, look at this thing. It's like an umbrella. Check that out. I got one on one side. It's like a double umbrella. Check it out. That's pretty darn cool. Ta-da, fixed. It's pretty darn amazing. It's probably got some wire in it. Yeah. That is super cool, right? I mean, that is super, that is super cool. And like when they do, I know there's also like,
They go into 20 seconds before the
Yeah,
blood
really?
vessels came back, or
Yeah.
not blood vessels, blood cells.
This is how they do the stents for heart attacks. This is how they fix those. It's pretty darn cool. Yeah. Ta-da! Put a little cage in there and then they're done. So like my dad has 3 of those. Looks like a chain link fence, right? And this is the interesting thing. What the heck? This is the interesting thing. They don't put you to sleep for this.
Yeah.
When they do this, they don't put you to sleep. They'll numb up the spot where they're going to go in through the artery. And they'll give you some Valium or something, maybe to chill out. They might do something like that. And you're wide awake while they're noodling up to your heart and sticking little cages in there. My dad sang Conway Twitty songs and watched the procedure on the video screen while he was wide awake.
Can you ask?
Maybe, but I think they try not to put people to sleep if they can avoid it. So you're wide awake and they're like, doing their thing, fiddling about. It's kind of weird to think that,
5 signs that death is near.
5 signs that death is nearby. I don't want to watch that.
With a sight and a dark hood is behind you.
That is true. That is scary. There we go. See it on the monitor. Show me one on the monitor. Not that. Not that.
That second one. The second one.
Oh, yeah, but that one's, yeah,
No,
that's, oh, there we go. Yeah. They're just gonna tell us about it. I wanna see him do it. Pretty cool. And this one, they're for sure doing it because they're, oh yeah, there. So here. This dude's gonna, are we doing anything? Oh. He likes, hang on. He likes rock music. That's called sinus rhythm, right?
I don't think he was.
He's not talking.
This is
Oh.
Dr. Board certified physician in cardiology, interventional cardiology.
Oh, fun.
and internal medicine. I'm here to help you with all the information you need.
Oh, there's English.
Informing you
That was
about
confusing.
all the latest treatments in cardiology. If you are new to this channel and would like to take great care of your heart,
Where are you
then
from, dude?
definitely consider hitting the subscribe button.
Where's he
below.
from?
You switch on the notification bell.
I don't
so
know.
you don't miss any new videos. Today, I'll be talking.
What
to
accent
you
is
about
this?
heart stents
Anybody
in
recognize it?
open blood and heart
It's not
in
quite
order to
Russian.
maintain blood flow to the heart muscle. The procedure that we perform to deliver heart stents to the coronary.
I'm really trying to figure out where he's from. Like,
Sounds like a dream.
Intervention.
it sounds like a mixture of everything.
This is an invasive procedure.
It sounds a little French. It also sounds a little Italian.
A patient with a known blockage of the coronary.
I gotta look it up.
Artery is brought to the cardiac catheterization laboratory for the procedure. We access the circulation commonly either through the femoral artery in the groin
Yeah, not
or the
Nolan.
radial artery in the wrist. The illustration shows the femoral artery, which is a large artery delivering blood to the leg.
Bullad.
You can see in this demonstration that the interventional cardiologist is gaining access to the femoral artery by a small bore needle through which a wire is passed. Then a short sheath is inserted over the wire.
Is that him? Yes.
Similarly, access to the circulation might be gained through the radial artery, which is shown in this illustration. You can also see the cardiologist obtaining access through this artery as well.
I'm not sure.
Through the sheath in the femoral artery or the radial artery, longer catheters are passed up all the way to the heart over a longer wire, guided by the X-ray machine. The image shows different catheter types that we use regularly when performing this procedure. The tip of one of these.
He works in
catheters is then
Indianapolis.
guided to the opening
Really
or
curious about this
orifice
guy.
of the coronary arteries of the heart, and a contrast material is injected. The blockage can then be easily seen in the X-ray. Left-hand side of the screen, you can see in the video that there is a clear blockage in the middle of the right coronary artery when the contrast is.
See it? That thin spot?
Yeah.
Yep, that's the blockage.
A special wire is then passed through the
Sorry.
This wire
my
is
husband's on a
known as
phone
the
call.
guide wire. You can see in
It's
this
hilarious.
video that the has been passed through the block. Over this wire, a small balloon is then passed and dilates the block. This is how it looks like when I'm performing this procedure. After the narrowing has been dilated, the balloon is withdrawn and the stent is then passed over the wire to the area of the blockage. This is how the stent looks. The stent comes pre-packaged and mounted onto a delivery balloon as shown. The stent is then delivered to the narrowed artery and deployed to keep the artery open.
This is
This is
hilarious.
how it looks to me during the procedure.
Guys,
And this is how it is expected to show anatomically.
that's not him.
After the stent is secured in place, a check or contrast shows that
When they pull out the guide wire,
pocket is no
like
longer
a starting
there.
a lawnmower, just like.
As
Yeah.
you can see, it is empty. The catheters and wires are then removed from the heart, and the short tube in the femoral artery or the radial artery is then removed. The bleeding from the artery side is controlled by a manual compression, and the patient is then taken to the coronary care unit for observation.
Oh, I found it. Oh, I would never have gotten this right.
Generally, the following day, if the patient
Never.
has been stable after the procedure, The patient undergoes education about the possible complications that might arise and about the new medications that will be started to keep the stent open. All the patient's questions are answered, and the patient is then discharged.
You gotta answer the questions before you discharge them. That would be really irresponsible if you didn't.
If you have any question about what I presented to you today, or any
Any guesses? Did anybody come up with any guesses to where this dude's from? So we all sat here trying to figure it out.
I think somewhere in Asia.
Asia somewhere,
Somewhere in the world.
somewhere in the world.
That's a
I would-
good.
Let's.
Norway.
Norway. Okay, I would have never gotten this right. This is Dr. Islam A. Bolad. Graduated from University of Khartoum, Sudan, University of Khartoum, Sudan in 1988. And he's in Indianapolis. He's Sudanese, or at least he grew up and lived in Sudan. I would never, ever, ever have figured that out. Yeah, that's not my, yeah, I don't know that. Islam Abbas Boland is his name. And he is at the University of Indianapolis, something. Oh, then he got his doctoral degree in cardiology from University of London, completed cardiology fellowship at Tulane University Lady Clinic, and then Harefield Hospital, UK, and then Central Middlesex Hospital, London. Central Middlesex Hospital. Middlesex is a place in London. I didn't name it. Uh-huh. And now he's at University of Indiana Medical School Cardiology Department. Ah, interesting. So this guy, he does all the complex stuff. He's like one of your top of the top experts. I guess if you have major heart issues, this is one of the few people who can fix you, because it says his professional experience includes complex multi-vessel coronary angioplasty and stenting, peripheral vessels angioplasty and stenting. These are normal things, including carotids, use of coronary thrombus extraction devices, coronary flow wires, intravascular ultrasound, pacemaker implantation, and programming single dual chamber PPMs and biventricular PPM, ICD implantation and programming dual chamber and VICD, electrophysiologic testing, and programmed ventricular stimulation testing, atrial flutter ablation, AVNRT ablation, accessory pathway ablations, and the use of intracardiac ultrasound. And ablations when they go in and like intentionally burn something away. So when you have, yes, like
Fire?
like with a laser,
What?
yeah. Honestly, with a laser or with a very hot wire. Yep. They do that to the tissue, like it cauterizes, but you can go in and intentionally, if you have something that's firing wrong, for example, like nerves in a particular chamber of your heart are firing wrong, they can go in and fry that part so it doesn't do it anymore. One of the more common ablations is actually a uterine ablation, like for women that have fibroids or problems like that. They can go in, and I've actually seen the surgery done live when I was in college. It was cool. But the little tool, the little tool, they get the camera and the light on it, and it has this sort of hook shape, well, not hook, half moon shaped wire. And the doctor would extend it. It would kind of go out like this, but it has a little loop on the end, half loop on the end. And she would put it up against the tissue she wanted and pull it back, and it would just slice it off and cauterize it the whole way back and just drop the strip down, and she'd just keep going.
They don't play Johnny Cash Ring Fire during one of those.
You know, they don't, but they should. That'd be great. So remember, you have to turn in your lab from last week. Is there anybody who is still trying to figure out their topic for their research? You really need to get that done if you haven't already done it, and you really should be started on it. Yours is my first thing to do today after I do attendance and letter.
You're already done.
No, she sent me, like I said in the thing, if anybody wants to send me a draft, I'll look at it. I just last weekend, you know, Holy Week, and then the dance and everything was kooky. But I'm always happy to look at rough drafts. So y'all are good. We're wrapping up soon. We are nearly done. This is gonna be done before you know it. Bye, Ames girls. Middlesex, England. That's where you're gonna go now. You wanna go to Middlesex, England? Whatever works for you.